All right. Well, hey, give everybody, folks, a few minutes here. Appreciate everybody joining this morning. Welcome and good morning to everybody. Today, we're excited to introduce our Ignite offering for DocuSign CLM and share with you how we think it will help your customers go live faster and be more successful in their deployments. To start off, some introductions from NeuraFlash. I'm David Marsh. I'm the sales lead for our DocuSign practice. Prior to joining NeuraFlash, I spent nearly 6 years at DocuSign. Join with me today is Nikita Joy, our practice lead and a seasoned CLM expert. And presenting with me today is Kimberly Wilson, one of our esteemed solution architects here at NeuraFlash for DocuSign. For a quick agenda, I'm going to give an overview on NeuraFlash if you're not familiar with us. We're going to give an overview of Ignite, some of the common questions we've received as we've rolled it out. Then we'll share how one of our customers used Ignite to go live on DocuSign CLM. We'll review some pricing. I'm sure everybody's curious about that. And then we'll save time for some Q&A at the end. Please use the Q&A function during the webinar, and we'll be sure to get them answered after or during the presentation. So a little background on NeuraFlash. We are a team of over 400 scrappy, nimble, and creative people that are fundamentally changing the way companies are doing business on the Salesforce platform. Our DocuSign practice has grown out of our customer base of over 300 clients who have had the need for CLM. NeuraFlash has chosen to only partner with DocuSign as we view it as the top solution in the space. We are one of the last boutique partners who are nimble, fast, and usually come in at about a third of the cost of the GSIs. We live by our credo that any customer engagement is a program and not a project. I think that can be seen by our nearly 5-star CSAT for all products. To double click into our CLM practice, I know I just talked about Salesforce, but we understand that your customers often have more requirements beyond just the Salesforce integration. And we are able to integrate with many other platforms, including SAP, Workday, Coupa, and others. We're a full service DocuSign partner from eSignature to DocuSign Gen to CLM and CLM Plus. I'd also like to call out that our CLM practice has a 5-star CSAT. Here are a few of our customers listed we've worked with. As you can see, they span across various verticals and geographies, from critter control all the way to Milan laser hair removal. So a wide range. Now to get into Ignite, the new way we're implementing DocuSign CLM at NeuraFlash. We have 2 new components that we're talking about today that have been developed from our practice. One is the Ignite methodology that we believe provides a simpler implementation, drives a faster go live by shortening dev time, UAT, and enabling customers to do more ongoing maintenance on their own. The other is the document migration engine that can be used in any implementation with NeuraFlash that has shown rapid migrations compared to other providers. We plan to discuss both of these in depth in the remainder of this presentation. Okay, so what is Ignite, right? We've thrown around a lot of buzzwords. Well, it's what it says here. It's a scalable, modular workflow system. But what does that mean? Each process is held in a building block, similar to Legos. The base and foundation is standard across all environments. The blocks are components that we've seen from other projects and we've developed. This allows us to demo fast and frequently and adapt quickly to your client's needs. Kimberly will talk more in depth about that here momentarily. But to back up just a second, where did all this come from? Why are we rolling this out? In this macro environment, we understand that your customers are needing to do more with less. We also understand that competitors to DocuSign are offering what appear to be faster and cheaper implementations, at least on paper. We recognize that other partners also offer their own take on this. It's important to call out that Ignite is still a customized solution to your client's needs and not just a pre-configured cookie-cutter package as others have offered. Your clients have complex needs, but these complexities often drive to lengthy UAT times, and we sought out to fix this as well with the air handling system. And I'd also finally like to share that this has been approved by DocuSign's expert services team, which is the penultimate authority in CLM implementations. Now to get into the customer, we'd like to share more about Federated, who implemented using Ignite. Just like to call out that this is an internal customer reference, just confidential this webinar between NeuraFlash and DocuSign, not an external reference at this point in time. Federated is a Fins enterprise customer. Their clients range from small brokers and banks up to large corporations and government entities. In this deal, and Kimberly's about to talk about it in depth here, but we replaced a legacy Wolters Kluwer product, Matrix CLM, that was being sunsetted. This was a competitive deal against Icertis and Conga. They had a very complicated contracting process. They have over 85 templates. A project of this scale and complexity would have been well over $500,000 implementation, but given the ability of using Ignite, we were able to get it to around 300K when it was all said and done. I'd like to turn it over to Kimberly now to walk us through the project, more details, and share more info about Ignite. Kimberly?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, to talk a lot more about Federated as our example here today, like David mentioned, it was an extremely complicated solution that came out of our discovery. To give you a frame of reference, our standard process is typically 6 to 8 human steps, I want to say. Again, standard implementation that would be, but with Federated solution, it came out to be about 60 human steps. So as you can see, an exponential increase in not only steps, but the overall complexity for the workflow process and the system that we were trying to build for them. There are a few different areas that make Federated a really great kind of example for our Ignite system that we're using. First, obviously, being their complex system that shows really the technical abilities that Ignite has to offer. And you can see some of the technical pieces behind that, at least that we use with Federated on our left-hand side here, but I'm trying not to get too technical today. I could go on for hours about some technical pieces there. But one being their complex system, right? The other is that we were on a very tight timeline. Like David mentioned, they were on a very strict timeline due to the fact that their old CLM system is being sunset at the end of this year. So we finished our implementation at the end of October, had very little wiggle room in order for maybe some expansion or any type of increase in timeline, right? And the last couple of months were meant for them to take over the system so that they could implement some more after all was said and done. So this required a lot of different aspects, but a last piece being that it required a lot of user ability to go into the system and then also build on top of that after we completed what we needed to so that they could take the system and run with it. So a lot of different components that we're seeing here with Ignite come into play. Next, though, we'll see that Ignite really stemmed from our DocuSign expert services experience. We worked with them for over 9 months on an enterprise project, and this is really where we created that foundation for Ignite. So we worked with them on creating a list of standard best practices or development best practices, and this is really what paved the way for Ignite, because other partners have pre-built configurations, but they don't follow that standard implementation methodology. If you're familiar with the development process, you probably understand that every developer builds very differently. I build very different naturally than probably what David would be building versus what some other newer developers might be building like. So it's really dependent on who is actually creating that configuration, the way that it ends up looking like. And then that creates some pressure for our clients to have to adapt to that after we actually finish our implementation with them. And we're trying to ease that burden. So by using this list of best practice standards that we've created with DocuSign Expert Services, we now have that foundation that we can use and we have used to build out our Ignite system. So the way that Ignite functions is that we use a standard, what I like to refer to as a base plate, since we're using the Lego analogy here. So if you're familiar with that big green flat Lego piece, that's kind of what this acts like here. It sets up the settings and functionalities that we need to have enabled in a client's environment from the get-go to allow us to put all of these building blocks into the system and then configure them in the way that we need for our clients. So next, you'll see that we have all of them put together, pieced together in whatever way that we need, but all these different Lego pieces use a sub workflow in the system, and we can move them around to fit the needs of our client. All of them act as different types of reviews or approvals in the system for them. So we have a bunch of different pre-configured Lego pieces that we can put together, all thanks to that base plate kind of that we've installed in our client's environment. And this is exactly what leads to huge cost savings for our clients, up to $70,000 or more. Obviously, like we saw with Federated, significant cost savings there, but for a standard, maybe a less complicated solution, we're estimating about $70,000 in savings for them, just because we no longer have to spend the massive amounts of time and energy to create that foundation like we typically would. And on top of that, we have all of our Lego blocks pre-built to fit all of their different needs. So we're really doing minimal customization just to make them kind of fit together in all of the right ways. And then speaking of fitting together, in a standard implementation, it would be really difficult to add or remove any of these different pieces because we're building with a very strict solution in mind. But our Ignite system allows us to be adaptable because these Lego blocks fit in so seamlessly. They are created for the purpose of fitting together with one another. So instead, we can add and remove all these different pieces seamlessly. And under normal circumstances, if we were to add or remove any of these pieces mid-development, it could break the entire system. But what we saw with Federated as an example is we got into Sprint 2 and we heard back feedback from the users saying, hey, we need this additional review in our process. And we were able to adapt to that without needing to extend any of the timeline because we had built it in such a way that all these pieces were meant to fit together. So this really minimizes the risk to our client and especially to our overall timeline and therefore cost for an overall implementation. So you might be wondering a little bit about what goes into each of these different building blocks. There's, like I said, a lot of technical aspects to it. I could go on probably for hours if I could about all the fun technical bits behind it. However, I'll spare you some of that time there. But I will say that the two important pieces here that I think are really cool about our different building blocks is that they include an error handling system and they include externalizing information on forms, which is what leads to a very user-friendly interface for our clients to be able to make updates. And if you're curious about the technical bits, we'll share this deck afterwards so that you can refer back to it if you want to read through some of these slides. But to start us off, our error handling system is really unique, and this all stemmed from a recommendation from DocuSign Expert Services, but it's really great for a couple of different reasons, but they're somewhat technical reasons, so I'll give you a little bit of background. When we are going through our development process in a workflow, whenever we encounter any type of error or bug in the system, the DocuSign system by default does not notify anybody about that happening. When we're in our UAT process, obviously we're looking through the workflow activity, we're seeing what's going on, but after that, in a live environment, if we've finished our implementation, we're leaving it to the client to then, really rely on them to be looking through that system for any failures that happen. But obviously everybody gets very busy. Not everybody's looking through the system all the time. And so there's a potential for documents to basically be lost in the system because the workflow does not notify anyone that an error has happened. The workflow just stops. And then the document's basically on pause. It's not inside of any type of system anymore. And therefore, the lost document really just ends up being lost money for our clients, which is the absolute last thing that we want for them. So our error handling system works in such a way that it is basically scanning our workflows and trying to detect any errors that might happen. And so when it does find an error, it actually assigns out a task to somebody. In this case, when we were going through our federated development cycle, it was me in that system. So it would assign a task to me. I would get notified, and that workflow would actually be put on pause. So the entire test or document is on pause in the system. And once I see that notification, I'm actually able to go into the back end of the system, take a look at what happened, and actually fix that problem that we saw, and then basically hit play on the workflow again for it to continue moving forward in its process. And this is exactly what prevents the documents, one, from being lost because we have people being notified at all failure points. And then also cutting our UAT time in half or more. We saw a drastic decrease in our UAT time with Federated because of the system that we have in place. And it really cuts back on the UAT time because for our testers, they are able to pick up any of the tests that have encountered error and any error from that current point and then move forward with it. The alternative under normal circumstances would be that a user encounters an error and then they have to completely restart their test from the beginning. As you can imagine, for Federated, their system was enormous. Just as an example, their full end-to-end test would take about 30 to 45 minutes for a full end-to-end test process. I would have a set of very upset users on my hand if they were doing testing and I had to tell them, hey, you have to restart your test because you encountered this one error. And it also leads to potential failure points if that happens, because if we're testing a single document for 30 to 45 minutes and their error happened 30 minutes in, they might forget what error that was and then, completely forget about that document after a certain point in time. Longer testing cycles just leave a lot more room for error, especially if we have to restart them. So the error handling system being able to pick up a document from wherever it actually hit a snag in the system and move forward with that is an incredible aspect, I think, to have in any type of pre-built configured system. The next aspect that's included in all of our different building blocks is how we externalize a lot of our information from our workflows. So under normal circumstances, our clients would need to go through, days of CLM training in order to be able to access the workflows and make any updates that they need to without fully breaking the system. Probably more training than that if their system is extremely complicated, like Federated's. But in this case, what we did was took all that information and actually externalized it into forms that are extremely user-friendly for our client teams to be making updates. So this is where they can make updates to simple things like their email notifications, their task instructions, any task names. Really, things that you would imagine should be easy are now made easy because they are now sitting inside of these forms in such a user-friendly way. With Federated as an example, they were able to go in day one of their go live and actually start making changes to their email notifications, to my surprise, because I've mentioned that these forms existed to them before that, but they actually found these forms themselves and started making updates because they found it to be so easy. And they were able to immediately make those changes in the system that their users were requesting. And this is what really builds confidence in the system for our clients, because they feel confident making updates to their system. They feel like they're able to actually make those customizations that they need whenever they're hearing feedback from their clients. And so this just overall helps the entire process. It mitigates risks. It does so much to benefit our clients and the overall system that we have built for them. The last piece that I'll go over is our AI aspect of the Ignite system. I know that everyone's very curious about that. This includes the default AI workflow steps that are included in DocuSign at the moment. So this includes 15 AI tracked attributes throughout the system. And what happens, or what can happen as part of one of our Lego block pieces that we've pre-configured, is a post-execution review that actually scans the document and then compares that to the AI tracked attributes and notifies the user of maybe what changes have been made to the document and what's not reflected accurately in those attributes for reporting purposes. So we have a small demo that's included in that. So that's here on the slide deck. Like I said before, we'll send this out to you afterwards so that you can take a look at that. It's a quick 5-minute video just to show you what that actually looks like in the system. But that will include all of our AI functionalities inside of Ignite to make that review process much easier for our clients. And then we'll also be updating the system as we go. I know DocuSign is trying to launch some fun AI functionalities in the future here, so we'll be sure to include that as those get rolled out.
One thing to call out is that the AI generated AI lawyer is not included, but free to look at. So
wish we could include it. That would be so much fun. All right, the last piece that I want to cover is our just re-emphasizing our faster time to value for our implementations. I know that I've mentioned a lot throughout these past few slides that really we're cutting back on time, cutting back on cost to our client, but this, I think, is a great summary for what all of those different components are doing for our overall timeline for our clients. So we're, like I said before, we're cutting out the need to build out the foundation, which typically takes around 4 weeks of a development cycle. We're cutting back on our customization time that's required. And then we're, like I said before, we are drastically cutting back on our UAT time, and because of our error handling system, and that then leads into a decrease in the support time that's required as well. Because of our error handling system that's in place, we can get everybody added in, and they kind of are able to troubleshoot more immediately, as opposed to requiring some more training from our clients. So overall, this is cutting back on nearly 2 months of configuration or overall development time that would be needed for a standard implementation. And in a standard implementation, this is really cutting back the time by half. So we are significantly saving time and money for our clients and creating that faster time to value for them. The last piece that I wanted to cover is our migration engine, like David mentioned before. If you've worked with any type of migration before, you're probably familiar with the fact that it takes time, right? When you're migrating documents, it just takes a lot of time. We're dealing with thousands upon thousands of documents. But what we've done is revamped the migrations process so that it is significantly faster. Under normal circumstances, for a migration that I've actually completed myself before, it took roughly a month to migrate about 10,000 documents. But with the way that we've revamped this migration system, with Federated, we were able to migrate 17,000 documents overnight. And I cannot emphasize enough how incredibly fast that is in comparison to a normal migration process. It is a game changer in migrations just because of that speed, especially when we're dealing with clients like Federated who are on such a strict timeline. This means the world to them instead of having to worry about potentially not having all of their documents in the environment that they need, or not getting them out of their old environment in time before it's actually sunset. So this mitigates a lot of risk for our clients by speeding up this process. And it includes a lot of different things with it. So some of the things that are included are bringing over some of their metadata or attributes with their documents, creating a custom folder structure for them, whether that be replicating their folder structure from their old system or creating a brand new one in their DocuSign CLM environment. And we can also rename all of their documents if they want. All of these things are optional. We can do any combination of the above. But for Federated, just as an example, they used all of these different aspects of our migration tool. So really maximized the capability of our migration process. And still we were able to migrate almost all of their documents overnight. So again, very fast system that is able to do quite a bit. On top of the ability to bring over documents from an old system, this tool is significant because it also allows for mass updates to their documents later on in their life cycle, right? So for instance, for Federated, if in 2 years they want to change their folder structure completely, they can do that with this migration tool because it is working with so many documents, so many thousands of different documents. And it can apply that new folder structure to all of them. And the same goes for updating all of their attributes in a development cycle. Changing attributes can be an absolute pain, but with the migration tool, it is made far, far easier. So not only are they able to bring over documents from their old environment, but they're also able to still use the tool for years to come to make mass updates to their system. And this whole migration tool still uses the same error handling methodology that we've created for Ignite. So there are no documents ever lost in the system. They are always tracked. And I know that can be a concern for a lot of our clients, the fact that we might be migrating thousands or hundreds of thousands of documents at a time. They're concerned about some getting lost in the process, but with our error handling system, that ensures that none of them are getting lost at any point during this fast process. So that's all I had to cover. I'll pass it back over to David now for some pricing information.
Awesome. Thanks, Kimberly. Yeah. And hopefully you've seen today, right, the themes of fast, more efficient, lower cost, right? I mean, right there, 17,000 docs migrated overnight. It's pretty impressive. So thanks, Kimberly. Yeah. So, I know we've reviewed a lot in a short amount of time. I'd like to share some pricing information, though, to give you an idea of kind of a starter package. But just as a reminder, any and all of our engagements can be customized. We're able to make custom SOW for any of those projects, and welcome the opportunity for that. So as far as the pricing for Ignite, so again, It's a Ignite though is a methodology of how NeuraFlash is implementing DocuSign. We scope it out and use just like any other normal project. However, if you have a customer that falls into these parameters, just to give you a ballpark, right? So if a client has up to 5 templates, up to 10 process steps, requires 15 attributes, right? The ballpark for that is around 75K for the level of effort. On the migration engine side, and again, this is be included in any can be included in any NeuraFlash project. It's essentially 50 cents per file. We also give the option though of a customer to purchase the tool outright and migrate documents on their own for that 15K. Would make sense if they have a lot of docs that would go past that dollar amount there, or if they know they're gonna have some ongoing projects. So we install that in their environment and give them training on how to use it. Again, I'd call out that that 75K, that's not necessarily a floor or base offering. It's just I think you agree that there's a fair amount included within that. So definitely give us a call. Let us know. We'd love to engage with your customers. Love to make something work, especially here in Q4. So yeah, that about wraps it there for the pricing. I'm going to move it over to some questions. I know we've got a lot of time left here. So let's see if there's any questions. Feel free to put them in the chat, or you can go off mute here. I'll start with one, though. Looks what we got was, how does this help compete with Ironclad? So I know that we sent out some messaging around that. Hopefully you start to see how it kind of comes together around quicker implementations. But basically, we view it as, we know Ironclad generally comes in with what seems to be a more simpler, sleeker solution. They demo it really well, is what we've heard. But we think that, being able to get folks live quicker, and this is our way of handling the implementation piece, right? A lot of feedback has been, and also with other competitors, that the implementation can be like 2x the license cost, if not more, or really just kind of a lot of sticker shock for customers. So this is our effort to get that down, even if it's a more complex, customized solution, to get that down lower for them. And again, I'd say this is scalable. More probably that starter package is for smaller customers, smaller use cases. But again, I mean, you saw with Federated, right? I mean, that's in the enterprise space, complex customer methodology applies to all folks. Yeah. It's like, how does somebody ask, how does this allow a customer to build on their own? I think I mentioned that in the email as well. Kimberly, do you want to, Nikita, take that piece? I need to talk about that a little bit with the forms.
Yeah, no, I could talk about that a little bit. So, like I mentioned, for Federated, their goal was that the last 2 months that they have of this year, they're actually wanting to take the system and build on top of it themselves, everything else that they need. The fact that we have created this to be modular and work like Lego pieces is really what allows for a client to take those pieces and really run with them. It requires a little bit of extra training on our side, but once the client has the understanding of workflows from a baseline from their DocuSign workflows training, we're able to complete training in about the same amount of time that it would normally take for our typical admin training, to explain to them the methodology behind Ignite and those different building blocks, so that they can take them and then use them to create some new ones or build on top of what we have already made for them. And that's exactly what Federated is doing right now. In the last couple of weeks, we've completed some extensive training with them, and they're now off and running with the whole system that we have created for them. So because we've made it so modular, that's what really allows for them to pick it up and move forward with that, with some few hours of additional training.
Nice. I know we got one question in the chat there about the Federated project. Kimberly and Nikita, what was your biggest challenges with the implementation?
It's a really great question. I'd say the biggest challenge with this implementation, and probably with any implementation, I'd say, is just the sheer amount of enhancements that were requested. But again, I think Ignite makes that really easy to accommodate. That ended up being a lot of what we focused on in UAT, was, instead of bug fixing, more enhancement implementation, because of our error handling system working so fabulously. we were able to focus more on the enhancement pieces and maybe adding in some more of those different building blocks as they were able to get into the system and start feeling it for themselves and getting an idea of where they really wanted the system to be heading. So any implementation deals obviously with a lot of enhancements, but that was made a lot easier just with the fact that, you know, we made it so modular based and we were able to prioritize enhancements during our UAT process.
Awesome. Yeah, and we hope to have them as a reference here soon as well. Question for you as well. We got here. What's the max volume for the migration offering? Is there any technical limitation there?
Yeah, no, there is no maximum actually for the migration process. I'd say my recommended maximum might be upwards of 50,000 for a single run that you're doing, just to make sure that everything is running as smooth as possible because it is so fast. You want to make sure that there are minimized errors, right? So maybe 50,000 might be my recommended maximum, but in theory, if you have 100,000 documents and all of your information is formatted perfectly, you could run all 100,000 documents at a single time. And the great part is that you leave the system just running. So all you have to do is come back to it after it's finished and check out any errors that might have happened if the information was misformatted. But I mean, really, the sky's the limit, I would say, with this new migration tool.
Awesome. Awesome. See another question here around, are there any business cases you feel work best with Ignite? I think my first thoughts on that are that really it's an implementation methodology, right? That is how it's structured, really not dependent upon any specific type of use case, right? Varying complexity, but Kimberly, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, there's I'd say no necessarily best use case. It's great to start showing with some complex projects like we've had with Federated, but even simple implementations work just as well. And Akita, I saw you come off mute for a second, so I don't know if you want to chime in.
Yeah, I think that for the more complex use cases where it's true CLM and there is a life cycle, Ignite really shines because of all of the building blocks. But to Kim's point, we can use some of the features like those e-forms perfectly when we are doing smaller implementations, right? To make the ease of future use better, but truly getting the most out of all of the different building blocks are with those enterprise projects where there are multiple approvals and different documents going at different times and things like that.
Nice. And I think that kind of answers the other question too around it working for both SMB and enterprise clients. And I think you've seen, Federated was an enterprise use case, multiple different, a lot of different folks involved there across the enterprise, and then smaller customers as well that we've worked with. So yeah, I think it's very scalable. So, all right. Awesome. Well, I appreciate everyone's time today. We'll be sending out this deck and the recording for folks to reference. Wanted to put my contact information here. Definitely look forward to being in touch. If we haven't already met, definitely feel free to reach out. Would love to talk more about Ignite and how we can help your customers. And let's go win together in Q4. Thanks, Kimberly and Nikita. Appreciate your contribution. You're leading this effort as well here, and all your assistance and partnership. And thank you to DocuSign for being a great partner as well. So let's close out the year strong. Thanks, everyone.